In part 1 of this video, I'll show you how I use Claude Code to connect to my Schwab account and public data to make stock trades. In a prior video, I talked about how I use the Wall Street Journal new highs list to determine which stocks I should buy. I would go down every single ticker, research it on Schwab.com, see if it beat the benchmark, and if it did, then I would buy that stock. But it got pretty repetitive and time-consuming to go through this list every day. So I thought, how could I automate this process? Researching this online, I saw that other people were using an API from Schwab to connect to their trading platform. So I went to the developer portal and requested an API key. It took about a week for it to get approved, and once I got it approved, I went into Claude. So just to level set, I have zero coding experience. So my friend helped me write the first prompt, excuse the typos, and basically just walk through what we were trying to do, which is we were trying to work on a trading app. We will send the API key after the project folder is created and to get started. And then Claude helped us walk through, how do you register? So Claude created the trading app folder, told us what to do on the developer website, and then what will happen once we get the key and the secret client to connect that over to Claude. Again, I have no coding experience, so then when Claude told me to run the CD trading app type script, I ran it in my command file, but it kept giving me an error. So we went back and forth for a while until we figured out that actually I don't have Python installed on my desktop at all. Actually, I didn't know there was an error because it would tell me some of the tickers that it was displaying in the dashboard, but after asking it a few questions such as, is this live data? And I don't see my account, it turns out that this was actually dummy data that it was returning for me. Once we got that figured out, I asked it to create a dashboard, which we'll take a look at in a second. And I also gave it my Wall Street Journal username and password credentials so that it could pull up the new highs, but it said it couldn't do that. However, it did pull up some public data to get the new highs every day. Here's when we figured out that I didn't have Python installed and that I needed to install it. And I would ask questions such as, do I need to be in root, or can I install it in the folder where I am? Claude did a pretty good job of walking me through step by step anytime I had questions. Here is when it was only returning 3 accounts from Schwab, but I actually have about 15. So I asked it to confirm how many accounts were connected through Claude and Schwab so that I can verify that it was actually returning the right data. And here's where Claude said, these are mock samples that I generated for you to review, and they contain 14 fake tickers. So one of the lessons learned is to constantly reevaluate if the data that's being returned is true, and also to not blindly just accept what data it's returning, but to cross-reference what you know or what you think it should be returning versus what you see it return. Once I got the first dashboard to look correct, then I created a second, third, fourth, and working on a 5th dashboard tab to help me analyze stocks before I make trades. So here's where I gave it the Wall Street Journal username and credentials, and it says you can't do the scraping on Wall Street Journal because it's against the agreement, but it will pull up public source data for 52-week high. So that was pretty awesome. So there were a lot of commands that I needed to run in Python, which I had never coded in Python. So I asked Claude to be very specific as far as giving me individual commands of what I need to copy here and paste and when I need to run it, instead of giving me a list of 5 or 10 different commands that I needed to run all at once, which is what I was doing, and I kept getting errors. So now Claude will give me one command to run in one copy and then another command to run in another copy. So returning a list of 52-week highs is not enough because I could get that data myself. What I wanted Claude to do is identify which ones were trending day over day and hitting the 52-week high. So I asked it to create a stars column where every single day it would scan a 52-week high list. And if a certain stock made the 52-week high on day 1, day 2, day 3, for instance, it would add 3 stars. So then I can see that that stock has momentum and that it's increasing and might be an indication for me to buy that stock because it's continuing to go up. Here's an example where I'm asking it to please remember to put it in a format that I can copy and paste individually to take action, because over time, a lot of the scripts were unclear to me as far as which ones I needed to run and which ones I didn't. So on day 1, it ran and gave me 1 star, which is what I expected. But on day 2, it didn't run. And so I asked it why it didn't run, and it said, well, if your computer is on sleep mode, then it's not going to run. So then I asked Claude to please wake up my computer and run the script, whether my computer is in sleep mode or not. So that's one of the other things that we did, is that regardless of whether I'm actively at the computer or not, I usually leave my computer on, and it should be waking up my computer to run the script. One of the issues that we ran into is that I needed to run or I needed to set my computer as administrator, and we kind of went around on that for a while and it didn't work out. So then we just changed the time of when the script would be run. So for instance, instead of 6 p.m., which is usually when I'm having dinner and I put my computer on sleep, we now have it running at 9 a.m., which I'm normally at my computer at 9 a.m. because I'm trading. It's not going to be perfect because obviously there's a lot of market fluctuation. So then we have decided to have the script run at 9 a.m. and then again around 2 p.m. when the markets are closed, and to not duplicate the number of stars, but to override the file from 9 a.m. So on first run, it added 677 stars, since that was the first day of the run of what we call our 52-week high. Also, I had to change the code a little bit because it kept trying to run a 52-week high list and stating that my Schwab API will expire in 7 days. And so I was telling Claude up here that public data shouldn't rely on whether we have a connection to Schwab or not, because what I want to do is take the public data and then cross-reference that with what I have in Schwab. So it's more important for me to understand what the public data, the 52-week highs, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star is returning, then I can place a trade in Schwab, and that it shouldn't matter whether I was connected to Schwab or not to run the dashboard. So that's another thing that we had to segregate out, is to be very clear on what public data was, what private data was, and then why one dashboard shouldn't affect one connection versus another. So here's where I just say the risers tab should be refreshed daily, even when the Schwab connection is lost, because the charts actually don't rely on whether Schwab is connected or not. Only my account list relies on whether Schwab is connected or not. So we did change some of the code here so that it does not rely on Schwab connection. So here is where it says holdings, which is what I own, comes from Schwab, but the charts come from Yahoo. So we don't need the Schwab connection to actually run the charts to make analysis. The other thing I had to figure out is the first time the script ran was on Thursday. Friday, my computer was asleep, so it didn't run. So we changed that it will run regardless of whether my computer is actively on or not. And then the next day it ran was Saturday. So I did miss one day, but that's okay. But when you start coding these things, you have to take all the various use cases into account, whether it's a Friday, it's a weekend, it's a Monday, it's a holiday, etc. Because this is stock trading, obviously I'm in the Pacific Coast, so markets are closed after 1 p.m. Pacific time. Markets are closed on weekends and some holidays. So there will be some use cases that you have to think about when you run this kind of script. And this is specifically just for stock trading. And this is just an example that says Claude actually missed on Friday because my computer was asleep, and there is no backfill, or basically it can't go back one day to take that snapshot of the day that it was missed. Okay, so we changed the time, it looks like, to 8 a.m. It missed one day, can't be backfilled. So starting on a certain day, I should at least see 2 stars on my dashboard, which I did confirm the next day that there were 2 stars because the script ran now for 2 days. One thing to note is that I had my computer on sleep, not power off, and Claude had assumed that either I didn't connect the battery or the machine was actually off. So we went back and forth on that for a while on what it actually meant when the script was trying to run and there was an error. So I was very clear that the machine was on sleep mode and not on battery or AC power was off. So I'm going on vacation, and I wanted this script to run even though I was in a different time zone. So I changed it to now run twice a day, which I had mentioned earlier, just in case I'm in a different time zone, but I still want to trade off hours. Okay, that was all just for the dashboard and getting the data to look proper. Now we're actually going to connect it with Schwab and taking a look at how my returns are doing. So one is getting public data from the internet on which sectors are rising. And then the second part is how much allocation do I have against those sectors that are either rising or lowering. So the first part was to get the dashboard up and running with public data. Then the second part is to take a look at how I'm doing against what the data is returning, so I know where I need to course correct as far as the allocations of my own particular account. So the market's been rising for the last 5 days, but today there are profit takers and the market is down. So then I thought, why not do the exact opposite? Instead of buying stocks in the hopes that they go up, you can also buy stocks in the hopes that they will go down, aka short selling. So today I asked Claude to create another dashboard called 52-week lows, mirroring the 52-week highs, so that I can start short selling, making money regardless of whether the market goes up or the market goes down. So I ran the script for the 52-week lows. Today there are 171 tickers on a 52-week low. Because this is the first day I'm running the script, I should only see 1 star. And again, I asked Claude to be very clear about putting every script on one line. So I just ran this one, short lows. Next, I'm going to run the dashboard one. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here into my command line, and then hit run. Let's go over what I was trying to do in Claude Code, and then I'll go into the details of how I did it after this video intro. I want my money to make money, so let's take a look at the sectors that are returning high, and we'll put more of our money in there versus some of the sectors that aren't returning as much. Now, normally when you look at stocks, you take a look at, for instance, the year to date, returns over time, etc. But what I wanted is not just this grid view, which is actually very hard for me to visualize, but I wanted a linear view, and I also wanted to know the comparisons of how this particular stock or sector was doing against other sectors. So I asked Gemini to provide me a list of the sectors. So it says there are 11 sectors, and I thought about a 3-month return would be good. So I asked it to create me a line graph of the returns of the 11 sectors. So here we can see that the XLK technology sector is returning 36%. Industrials, XLA is returning 12%, financials, etc. And at the bottom of the sectors, energy, XLE, is returning negative 10%. So if I had any stocks in energy, I should probably sell those and then front load it up here in XLK, XLI, or XLF. So that was the first part of my analysis, is what are the sectors and how are they returning? And we can see here on the right-hand side, this is the same 36%, 36%, 12%, 12%. So here is the return of the sectors the last 3 months. But now here on the right-hand side is the data from Schwab. Not to say that I need 36% of my money in this sector, which is the returns, but how much percentage of my money across all my various accounts am I invested in the technology sector. So for instance here, I have 27% of my money in technology, which is pretty good. 8% of my money in industrials, which is also pretty good because these are the 2 highest performing ones. But here's the interesting part of this analysis. I have 5% of my money in communication services, which is returning negative 1.50. So this is an indication to me that I should be selling any stocks that aren't performing benchmark in communication services and moving this money into some of these other green sectors. So where the Schwab API came in is now show me of this 5%, what accounts do I have and what stocks do I have that fall under communication services, so I know what to sell. So collapsing this list, I can see under communication services, which is returning negative 1.50. I have 15 tickers in here pulling from my Schwab account for a total amount of 310,000. So I should be selling, if these tickers don't beat benchmark, selling these tickers and moving this 310,000 into an area that's returning more. So for instance, here, financials, industrials, technology, etc. When I expand this selection, we can see here are the tickers that I own under communication services, the quantity that I own, whether it's a gain or loss. And if it's a loss, then I would probably sell this, take the tax write-off at the end of the year, and then load it into an area that is making more money. And you can see that not every ticker, just because it's in communication services, means that it's something that you should sell. Definitely research every stock and make sure that that stock is beating benchmark, or it's a stock that you either want to keep or sell. So for instance, under communication services, it's listing Google under this area. It's returned 45%. And I like Google as a company, so I probably would not be selling Google. But this is just a good data point to see which accounts are under which sector and if that sector is performing or not. The second part of the analysis that I had Claude do is, this is my sectors. Let's take a look at recommended sectors. So this is a 1 month view now, because again, I'm trying to have the money make money. In 1 month, which sectors are increasing? So here, healthcare is increasing at 8%, financials at 6%, industrials at 6%, etc. So then I said, give me those tickers, not necessarily that I own it, but give me those tickers underneath healthcare, financials, industrials that I can take a look at. So for instance, here, I usually sort by year to date because obviously we're trying to get returns here. So here, Claude is telling me that SNXX under financials is one of those items under the financial sector. It's returned 1,000% year to date. So I'll go into Schwab.com, just do my due diligence if this is a stock I want to buy or not, etc. Next one, for instance, is MGRT, returning 870%. Next one is a bull for Micron, MUU, returning 851%, etc. So we'll take this returns of 1 month, look at the returns of these particular stocks, research it on Schwab, and then make a decision whether I want to buy that stock or not. So the third tab here is under ETFs. So there are a number of ETFs that you can take a look at. In one of my earliest videos, I talked about creating a foundation with ETFs. So ETFs are basically a collection of stocks and they trade like stocks. So in an earlier video, I recommended that what I do is I buy a little bit of US broad, US large cap, US large growth, value, mid, small REITs, and then I go into international, etc. Now you can buy what I call the S's from Schwab, or the exact same list under Vanguard, depending on what companies you like, or iShares, for instance. So what I did is I took the exact same list here and I asked Claude to create me a dashboard based on the ETFs and to see where they're trending. So here's the output of that ETF list. So we can see that, for instance, NASDAQ QQQ is returning 24% in the last 3 months. And then amazingly, small and mid cap is returning more than, for instance, large value, which is 12%. Not to say that any of them are negative, it's just that some are returning more than others. So I asked Claude to do the exact same thing, which is give me the list of ETFs and their returns versus where I'm weighted in my portfolio against these ETFs. And in this example, I literally did buy, for instance, SCHA, SCHM, SCHG. So we're only going to see one ticker underneath each one of these line items and then where the ETF is held in which account. So for instance, if international small cap is only returning 2% and I have 1% of my money there, I might want to move my 1.7, not all of it because diversification is important, but I might want to move some of this, for instance, into either QQQ or SCHA. In a prior video, I showed how I use the Wall Street Journal 52-week new highs list to determine what stocks to buy because I want to catch that momentum. I've been doing this for about 6 months now, where I go through every single ticker here, research it on Schwab.com, and then determine whether I want to buy the stock or not. And quite honestly, after 6 months, it got pretty repetitive and boring. And so I thought maybe I could use Claude to automate this process and make my life a lot faster and a lot easier. Plus, looking at this list day to day, I used to keep a notepad to write which tickers I bought because some of these tickers are consistently making new highs and some of them aren't. So that was the other thing I asked Claude to do, is come up with a system. Actually, I told Claude to come up with a star system that would tell me which stocks were reaching new highs. And if it consistently is beating or making new highs, then I know that that is definitely a momentum stock that I should be buying. So I created a fourth tab here called risers. So if we sort through here, and in the later video it'll go into details. But on day 1 I got 1 stars because obviously that was the 52-week high for the day that the script ran. Day 2 the script didn't run because Claude thought my computer was unplugged or powered off, and in fact it was just asleep. And I asked Claude to run the script whether the computer was on sleep mode or not. Then on day 2, it ran. So any stock that, for instance, AAAP made a 52-week high on, for instance, 6/27, and then on 6/28, it showed up on the list again. So it had 2 stars. And then 3rd day, 4th day, 5th day, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up to the top because we can see that we're about on day 5 now, and there are some stocks that have consistently for the last 5 days made a new high. So for instance, AFSM, ALLL, ASTH have consistently made for 5 straight days, showed up on the 52-week new high list. The other thing I do is I sort it by year to date because we saw that with the ETF list, the ETFs are returning about 30%. So for instance, for my criteria, I wouldn't buy ALL even though for 5 days it met a 52-week high because it's 18% year to date, whereas I should just buy a ETF that's returning 30 to 40%. So what I do is I sort by year to date. From here, if it's 5 stars or 6 stars or 7 stars, I have this running for 7 days and then it consistently overrides the data. But on 5 stars, because it's day 5, EVC is returning 366. So this is a stock that I will evaluate on Schwab.com, see if it truly is a good stock or not, and then decide to buy it or not. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. And then just going down this list, CDNL, again, 5 stars, returning 255%. So this is also another stock that I might consider buying. Let's actually go to Schwab.com and also Thinkorswim just to evaluate if the data from Claude is correct, because should not take the data blindly from Claude. Always do your due diligence. And when you watch the detailed video of this later, you'll see that there are 2 or 3 times where I had to correct Claude because it made some assumptions that were either incorrect or that I wanted it to course correct. So EVC is looking pretty good. It's returning pretty high for year to date. Let's go down and take a look at the price performance comparison. And now let's take a look at the price performance comparison, which I found only Schwab has this chart and is the #1 chart that I use when I make a buy recommendation on a stock. So EVC for 1 month is returning 55%, 6 months 356, and 1 year 455. Versus if I had just bought the S&P, I would be negative 0.93, positive 9, and positive 20 for the year. So obviously, according to this, EVC and Claude is correct. It has reached 5 days of a 52-week new high. All right, Schwab.com showed us that EVC was a good stock, but I am always cautious before I buy any stock, and I like to do my triple due diligence.